thing on the agenda is the superintendent's report.
Great, thanks. So I just wanted to mention that Deb Gallagher, Donna Tobin, and some teachers and I had the pleasure of going to the State House last week. Both Downey and Martha Jones were recognized as schools of recognition by the Commissioner of Education. And so we got to go to a very nice ceremony, and Representative McMurtry was there also, and a nice proclamation for both schools, so we have something we can frame and hang proudly. Our acknowledgement to the wonderful faculty and staff at Martha Jones and Downey for their wonderful work. It's about achievement on MCAS, but also hitting targets and narrowing gaps, and really recognizes their efforts to make sure that all kids are making progress in learning. So well done. And I have two other things to mention before the MSBA project update. One is just that J-Term is off and running. The rain was a little bit of a bummer today, but we adapted. And I'm told, but I haven't seen it yet, that we were on both Channel 4 and Channel 7 tonight. So I'm looking forward to seeing how the stories came out. And we have a couple of other journalists who are coming out tomorrow to do some things for radio and print also. So some good press for that. And then finally, in follow-up to last month's meeting, Josepha, Carol, Lemma, Ken Aries, and I did meet with Tom Filden, the town's energy manager, just to talk about some potential solar projects. As you know, we have solar panels on the roofs of 4 schools, I think, at this point. So we talked about moving forward and making sure that we're maximizing our roof space with solar panels. And also, it looks like there's an opportunity to install some solar panels on some land that we have out in the woods on the Hanlon site that actually would allow us to do some interesting things in the design of a new building, even if it's not at the Hanlon site. So it could have some energy implications. So that was.
I think we were just going to check to see under whose.
Correct. We need to do a little legwork
Right.
to figure some things out about that parcel of land. But in principle, we thought it was
Right.
exciting to continue with some of those initiatives. And I think Maya is actually going to talk about the MSBA.
Yeah, so we are moving along with the new building. On June 3rd, we went to the MSBA and had our OPM review panel meeting, where we presented Compass as our choice for our owner project manager. And it was a bit of a formal panel. They asked Compass a lot of questions. They're clearly familiar with the company, which is great. Tim Bonfatti and his team presented. And overall, it was a very good meeting. And so Compass is officially on board after that meeting. One thing the MSBA suggested that we actually highly agree with is to bring Ken Aries onto the school building committee as a member. I'm not sure, Ken, if we've talked to you about
have.
this.
Yes, Ken's not hearing this news now.
Yep.
So I think we have an action item later on to vote him onto that committee. He'll be a huge addition. He's going to have a very important role in whatever we come up with. We also had a June 6th meeting of the school building committee. Again, Compass came and presented a lot of information to us about the process, really focusing on the process up to construction, because that's where MSBA plays the biggest role. It became very clear to us that this really is a very prescribed process, and we are going to have a lot of interaction with the MSBA. The next step for us is the architect selection. We've already submitted the RFS to the MSBA. They actually choose the architect, which we learned. We are on the panel. 3 people will be on that panel. It will be me, Emily, and Nancy Hyde on the design selection panel. And we understand that this district has a lot of input on who the architect will be. The ultimate decision is the entire 12-member committee. We are on the agenda as of now for October 1st for that. So hopefully by October 2nd, we will have an architect on board. Once the architect's on board, we've got our OPM, our architect on board, we're going to start really getting into community engagement. So that's something that everyone should be aware of. We're really gonna be looking to the community in the fall, to start getting a lot of input, and that will be a big push. You'll hopefully see a lot of communication from us on that. I think that's where we are. Anything else?
So I just wanted to mention to the committee that, I have a draft of a letter that I thought we might wanna send out to residents. We updated them in December and March, and I thought at the close of the school year, it might be good to update people about where we are and just sort of foreshadow that the fall would be, a big time for community engagement. So maybe I could just circulate the
Sure.
draft and leave them on there.
Good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and one of the things, we don't have to talk about, just briefly, I was struck by, we talked about in the MSBA committee, like, having an option, we talked long, like, when we started about people that were, I hate to use it, just parents or residents. And so I was struck a little bit when I looked around the room the other day, that it was, everyone had kind of a former role, a lot of them not residents. We just maybe just wanted to visit, because it makes sense to have one or two representatives kind of representing parents, and just kind of into that perspective, more as we can do community engagement. So, we don't need to resolve that today, but it's something that we talk about. Okay.
Any other questions?
Okay. So, we're gonna move to public participation. This is an opportunity for members of the public, to share perspectives. If you are interested in sharing perspective, if you could, raise your hand, and then when you, are called on by the chair to, state your name and address. Is there anyone who'd be interested in sharing anything in public participation? Okay.
Oh, two of you.
Seeing none? Just save 10 minutes, made up time, we're back, okay, so, discussion items, so, I'm gonna suggest, if it's okay with, everyone else in the school committee, that we swap, so that Lynn, can go enjoy the rest of her night. We swap the college admissions update with the district improvement goals, if that's okay with everyone?
Sounds good.
Okay, Lynn.
And then I have a clicker for you here.
Hello, everyone. So I believe it's that time of year again.
You need to push the button there to turn the light to green. Oop, up there around. There you go.
All right, got that?
Yeah.
Okay. So happy to report out on what the plans are for the class of 2019. So, we have a picture here of a nice outdoor graduation ceremony that we had this year. Great weather, it was a great ceremony. Class of 2019 consists of 261 students, 50% male and female. That is a picture of them, it's always a fun day, the last day of school for seniors. See how happy they are as they gather for that last time in the lobby before heading out for the last time. And taking a look at their plans, this year we have 98% continuing their education. We tend to hover around this number, around 96% is the average, so it's a little bit higher this year, 98% continuing, with 97% going to four-year colleges and fewer than 1% attending two-year colleges. We have a few students, 2% doing a PG year, gap year, or going right to full-time employment. For the four-year college statistics, we have 63% of our students going to private schools and 37% going on to public schools. And we sent out over 2,000 transcripts this year. On average, students applied to 8 colleges. We had 21% of the class apply early decision. That's that binding agreement. If they are accepted to a school early decision, they must attend. And 51% of those students were accepted. And then early action, 62% of the class applied, and we had a very high 98% were accepted to at least one of their early action schools. Early action has kind of the same benefits as early decision. They apply early and they hear early, they just don't have that binding agreement, so they can see how they fare at their regular decision schools and then make a decision in the spring. We have a record number of students attending the University of Massachusetts at Amherst this year. This is the highest number we've ever had, 34, which is great. That's Dasha Sternberg will be attending UMass. So typically we have just over half the class applied. 69% were accepted this year, But just to give you a sense of how competitive UMass is, we have a 3.77 average GPA for students accepted to UMass with a 13.14 SAT. That's in the regular pool. And then UMass has an early action option, and the GPA is even higher at 4.03 and 13.52 SAT. So UMass continues to get more competitive each year. The other Massachusetts state colleges, 7 students going to UMass Lowell, 5 UMass Boston, which has the residence halls now, which is appealing to students, 5 at UMass Dartmouth, and then the other state colleges there, Bridgewater, Worcester, Westfield, Framingham, and Mass Art. Out-of-state public colleges, and this is very typical, at University of New Hampshire, we have a lot of interest in that, so 11 students attending there. UVM, UConn, URI, and then Plymouth State are all the public colleges within New England. And then this is just a quick overview of the private colleges in New England that the students are attending. And I will break this out in much more detail for you in the report that we give you every summer. But we had the most students in terms of private schools. We have 11 students going to Boston College this year, 9 going to Providence. We have 9 going to Northeastern. We have 4 going to Fairfield. We have 8 going to Stonehill, 5 going to Merrimack, 6 going to Leavenworth, to give you some idea of some of the schools. And then out-of-state public colleges, and this is outside of the New England area. We have 3 students going to Montana State this year, which is a first, which is exciting. We have 2 students going to the University of Delaware and 2 students going to the University of Michigan. And the other schools up there, we have 1 student going to each of those. Norfolk State University is a historically Black college. And then outside of New England, private colleges, there's just some of the schools there. Another 5 students going to Syracuse, 5 going to Elon, 2 going to Hofstra, 3 going to the University of Dayton, 3 going to Loyola, Maryland, and the rest of other schools that 1 student is attending. We have 3 students venturing out to California this year, Pepperdine, Santa Clara, and Azusa Pacific. And we have 5 students attending international colleges this year. So we have 1 student going to each of the Canadian schools out there, Toronto, McGill, St. Francis Xavier, and Waterloo. And we have a student going to school in Scotland this year, University of Edinburgh. In asking seniors what was most important for them when they chose a college, location and distance from home was the biggest factor for students. They also looked at size, fit, affordability, major program, school spirit, and internships. And then in terms of national trends that we saw, more of the scary headlines out there. Most colleges announced record low admission rate, and we've heard this before. So we did see some record low numbers at some of the more competitive schools. And here's a sample of what's happening at the Ivy League colleges. The accepted rates have been going down fairly consistently over the past 5 years, with Harvard accepting 4.5% of students, for example. And then the applications are going up at all of those schools. That then leads to kind of a domino effect. So that next tier of schools, so here's some other selective colleges, and you can see Stanford with a 5% admission rate, Tufts 15%, Colby 16%, etc. And then, no surprise to any of us in guidance, that we landed with this college admission scandal that we all saw happen over this past spring. Some of the schools that were involved with that are up there. We're still, it's taking place at the federal courthouse in Boston, so we're still seeing those stories on the news. But basically, parents were paying someone by the name of William Singer, who found what he calls a side door into admissions, and he established contacts at various selective institutions, and essentially bribed coaches to accept students under the guise of them being recruited athletes, many of whom had never played the sports that they were recruited for. And then he also identified proctors for the SAT and ACTs, and got them to either take tests for students or change their test scores, change their test answers after they left. And so people paid tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars for him to do that. And many of these colleges were affected, and we are still seeing the outcome of that taking place with many of those parents pleading guilty. So it's a frenzy out there. Clearly those parents didn't read this book. Frank Rooney, who writes for the New York Times, wrote a book called Where You Go Is Not Who You'll Be. He does a nice job talking about all the things that are important in terms of your college experience, and that's the message that we're trying to convey to our students as well, that they want to make the most of their college experience and take advantage of opportunities to volunteer, do research, participate in internships, and employers have consistently said that they're more interested in the experience of a candidate than what college they attended. And what we sometimes lose sight of is that most colleges in this country have over a 50% acceptance rate. So a lot of our students tend to focus on the more selective schools that have that under 30% admit rate, and that makes for a very competitive environment. But I just put a couple of samples up here. For a school like Mass Maritime, which has an 83% acceptance rate, their average job placement, usually within 90 days of graduation, is 98%. Oftentimes it's 99 or 100. The average starting salary for a Mass Maritime graduate, which is very specialized in the maritime industry, but they're starting at $63,000, and some of the grads come out making six-figure salaries right out of Mass Maritime. Miami University in Ohio has an acceptance rate of 68%. We have more and more students applying here. They have a very generous scholarship program, and some of our students are eligible for half and full-time tuition payments, scholarships. And they have a high retention rate of freshman to sophomore year of 92%, which is comparable to some of the most selective schools in the country. And so I also just put up kind of for a basis of comparison down at the bottom there, we have a lot of students interested in Boston University, which is a great school, but it's very competitive with a 25% acceptance rate and a $72,000 price tag. And students who like BU often find that they like University of Pittsburgh as well. Has a very similar vibe to it, and they have a 60% accept rate, and even for out-of-state students, it's $42,000, and they continue to receive numerous accolades and high rankings in many areas. So those are the types of conversations we're trying to have with students. We are really looking to try to tamp down the pressure that goes along with the college application process. What we've done here at Westwood High School is increased our junior seminars, which are class sessions we have with students. We want to just give them more time to research colleges, complete all the tasks involved with applying to colleges, help them to expand their searches. A lot of students apply to kind of the same 12 or 15 schools, and part of that is because of where we live, and we're so near many wonderful schools, but we want them to just kind of expand their searches and their interests and look at other schools. I also just wanted to mention that last year our English department started, at the end of the year, they do a unit on memoirs, and they have used that as an opportunity to have students write their college application essays, which is just wonderful and makes a lot of sense. That tends to be the most daunting part of the process for students when they do apply in the fall. So most of them come out of school in June with an essay in great shape when they return in the fall, which is really nice for us. We notice that. And then we're talking more about just being a good consumer in the process. Talking to students about cost. We don't want them to be shocked in April when they receive their admission letters that they are interested in schools that cost $70,000. So we're talking about that earlier and early with them. We're talking about student debt, and we're placing more emphasis on just value and return on investment for their education. There's some great values for colleges out there that they might not be aware of. to our discussions. And then just to step back further in terms of that kind of that pressure and stress prior to even starting the college application process, when we talk to students about choosing courses, which they did a couple of months ago, we want to help them select courses in which they'll be challenged and successful, but we don't want them doing so at such a high cost that it's very stressful for them. So we have wonderful electives here and talk to students about the importance of incorporating those. Sometimes students are under the impression that they really need to take all academic courses, that the colleges want to see that, and that is not the case, and that's not the message we're sending. We've had many a valedictorian take 4 years of chorus or art or drama, and students who go to selective colleges have electives in their schedules. And it's just a nice break in the day for students that they really need with 7 periods a day. And we talk to them about balancing their academics and their activities outside of school, if they're athletes or if they're involved in the musical and the drama productions, and just having some downtime is important for students and finding that balance. In addition to that, we're trying to do more and more programming to support students' social and emotional well-being. We introduced a stress management seminar in the 10th grade seminar program. We do an SOS program in 9th and 12th grade, and that's primarily to educate students. SOS stands for signs of suicide, but it also talks about the importance of accessing mental health supports in school when they're in 9th grade, and then the 12th grade program is geared toward accessing those supports once they head off to college, where colleges are seeing an epidemic in terms of students accessing the counseling centers, so we want to get that message out to students before they leave here. They also answer some questions for us and talk about stressors that they have, and we ask them for feedback, and quite consistently they tell us that they would like more access to counselors, more programming around this. I think that Sean would tell you in the Courageous Conversations discussions with students too, they'd really like to hear more about that mental health support in school. They're asking for that. We introduced expert screenings this year with 10th graders, and those are really, that was part of a state mandate to screen students for drug and alcohol use, but it was also just another nice opportunity to sit with kids and make connections and have conversations about that stuff. And then we've been running our mental health awareness for a few years now, and again, consistently get positive feedback from students that night without homework, with therapy dogs, all the things that we talk to them to help them de-stress. They're very appreciative of that and ask us for more programs like that. And with that, I will say thank you to you, because I know central office and this committee approved us receiving another guidance counselor in the office, and we're thrilled. That is going to bring our caseloads down, and we're going to be able to devote more time to this type of programming with smaller caseloads, so thank you for that.
Questions for them?
So, just, well, one, thank you. I can say that as having had just graduated, the process is amazing, and I can honestly say that I did not know. So that means that what you all are doing is so effective. Because with both of my kids going through, I didn't have to do really very little except take contours. So, good work on that.
They did a lot too in the process.
No, I know they
They did a terrific
I'm
job.
just saying that as a
Yeah,
parent,
right.
there is this sense of, because it is a very stressful time,
Mhm.
and I might say, I got this. They're just extremely well prepared for this process. It's not to say that they're not stressed about it, but, the program you have or what you do to prepare these kids to go through this process is top notch, to say that from experience. The other, what I have a question about, I've noticed even since my oldest went off to college, which was only a couple of years ago, there seem to be more and more test optional schools.
Yes.
What do you think, is the trend continuing up?
Yes, it is. So there's now over 1,000 colleges that are test optional, and this is a result of schools looking at data over many years and finding that SATs, ACTs are not the best indication of success in college, but your performance in high school is. And so they're offering students that opportunity opportunity, including the University of Chicago, which is one of the most competitive colleges in the country. They just became test optional because they realized they were reducing their students to a number. So more and more schools are getting on board with that, which is great news for our students.
Take some pressure off.
Yes, exactly right.
And then the last thing I'll say is that I was recently in touch with a college classmate who I just found out is a reader from UMass Amherst. And we hadn't spoken in years, and I just spoke to her, and she said, I want you to know that anytime we get an application from Westwood, we know that it's a tremendous application, and the essays are always great. So, there you go, it's a little positive
Thank you.
feedback.
Yeah, and we've heard that from other students too, colleges as well, that they will dig a little deeper into the Westwood pile because our students go there and graduate in 4 years and do well, so that only helps future classes.
Charlotte?
Well, thank you and your staff for another wonderful presentation and the success you've had. From time to time, we've thought about getting more information, and one of the thoughts was, could we go out and survey kids after a few years after they've left? And I think we're gonna get emails to say things like, what courses, once you got to college, did you find very helpful to you? And what courses do you wish you had taken? How about the stress reduction? These programs are just, were they helpful? You know, other
Right.
kids weren't, we were prepared, just to get feedback, to strengthen, what we're doing well. And maybe, we have a student that ran into another student that did something we don't do that so that whole idea to get feedback
Right.
would that be helpful if we could do it?
Of course, and this is the second year we've collected the email addresses, so I think that it's on
That is
Emily's
on the
mind,
horizon.
once we have a few
Yeah.
years, that we can start doing that.
I
which is-
think it's
Yeah.
part of that, it will help.
Great.
Thank you.
I have a question. I've been reading about this adversity score that everybody's talking about.
Yes.
So what does a school district like ours do to address that?
So, this is brand new
Mhm.
initiative from College Board. They have created what they call the Adversity Index, and they piloted it this year with one school, Yale University, and then they piloted it with, I think, 20, so this year. And they've identified factors that they feel can contribute to a student's success or what might cause them to struggle in school, and they're gonna come up with a score based on the town the student lives in, the high school they attend, they'll look at economic factors, that type of thing. We got no information, I heard about it when it came out in the press, and none of my colleagues were familiar with it either. So we're still learning about it, we still have some serious concerns about it, because
Put something-
it's putting all of our students
Right.
into one category.
Right, and it puts a school district like ours at a
Exactly.
disadvantage,
Correct.
right?
So we're not too happy about
Yeah.
this new initiative from
Right.
College Board, and they have been hearing from guidance counselors about that.
So as a result, would you suggest that more kids go to the ACT? I mean, seriously. like-
Yeah, it's an interesting thought, and we do have most of our students do take the ACT as well, but it's something to think about.
Mhm.
We'll be getting more information on this summer, it's just some new, I really can't speak to the specifics yet.
Any other questions? I
Thank
just,
you.
better comment, I'd like to thank you for the value-based, it sounds like, at some point this is all gonna, I think you're seeing in the press, like these small universities getting squeezed and closing.
Yeah.
Demographics aren't working their advantage, but
Right.
I think that's important because, and you probably saw the article the other day about millennials, like the quote-unquote, the worst off generation, there's time, I think it's all kind of coming together, but I think that's important element, that
Definitely.
there's cost, but there's also value.
Yeah, the student debt issue,
Yeah.
where we're really trying to make students aware of that early
Good.
on. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure thing. And so we'll have, like I said, that detailed report to you next month.
Great,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Lynn.
Good night. Okay, so next on the agenda is the district improvement priorities. If you wanna say anything.
Well, so, I think we really talked a lot about this last month. As you know, we've been thinking about, strategy for district improvement, and we did some work on admin council to think about, what the priorities would be for the, next year. And as I mentioned, for a lot of these priorities, we think we should carry them over from this year to next year, and some of the action steps behind them would differ, right? So as we think about sort of what's the next step in this particular thing. But before we go any further, I did want to get some input from the school committee, just to make sure we're kind of on the same page about what the priorities are. And also this fourth category, facilities for the future. When I look at this, to me, this bucket is really, school committee work. And so I wanted to make sure that we had time to talk about that. I just took a shot at drafting 3 potential priorities for bucket 4 as a starting point. But I wanted to discuss that.
And just, as we talked about, there's a ton of detail.
There's a ton of
Like, these
detail
are 3,
behind
there's
this.
other things besides these 12 things, obviously.
Oh,
But,
sure,
yeah,
sure, yes,
so
yes.
The
This
big
is-
categories, the big categories, okay.
The big categories
Yeah.
are the big categories, exactly.
So thoughts, I think Carol suggested we have a little bit of a discussion on what, what's, I'd be interested in the committee's thoughts.
I have a lot of thoughts, I'm an HR myself, but I will leave it, no, go ahead, you go ahead. So, I guess a few observations. So, one thing I actually found interesting about looking at the school improvement plans was this thing around homework. And so, which I actually support about it, but we hadn't talked about a lot here. So it may just be calling out some of this, I forget what you call it, homework, I forget what it's called now. Anyway, there's both in the Thurston and in the high school.
Yep.
So it might just be calling out, because I think that's a topic with a lot of
That's what it
parents.
is. So that's a great example. So
Okay.
I think we should talk about that.
Okay.
So yes, you see that in the school improvement plan. So when we're thinking about meaningful learning experiences, we're
Yeah.
thinking about homework in terms of that, right? Like what
Yeah.
creates a high quality assignment? How do you make it purposeful? We're also thinking about healthy and supported school community,
Yeah.
right? How does homework, relate to that concept as well? So when we were thinking about action steps and some of these things, that's something that both Mr. Redmond and Mr. Bevan were interested in looking at. And so that's the detail behind this, and they
Okay.
put it into their school improvement plan to reflect it.
I guess my reflection is that's something, I don't know, that might be something you may wanna just highlight at the 12, because if you,
Yeah.
this is, or because I think that's something a lot of parents, not that they won't be, like, not that's all, lots of the stuff, it's, I don't know, it's just more of a point, I
I
know
hear
it's
what you're
just.
saying. So in other words, if it's on page 1, people are gonna see it,
Yeah,
as opposed
yeah.
to when it's hyperlinked,
Right,
they may not
right.
get there, yep.
All right, that's one, so, sorry, do you have, go ahead,
Just jump
yeah.
on that. Is that only with respect to the middle school and the high school? Is there any thought of looking at the elementary school
I
and
don't think
evaluating
that it's,
homework?
well, I mean, we talked about that. It was called out specifically for middle school and high school because they've started working with a consultant, they're doing some professional development around it, so I think it's gonna be a significant focus for the middle school and high school next year. I have to be honest, I don't think we have, decided to shine a light on it at the elementary level yet. We may learn some things from the middle school and high school
All right.
discussions.
Okay, my next one, it's a little more, again, we had talked about this a year ago. I still feel, when I look through this in school improvement gaps, that the achievement gap isn't clearly called out. And now you're doing work on it, and it may not, it's just more, even when I look through the school improvement plans, I know it all kind of interconnects, it's just more of a comment. And I know there's things that lead to it, but it's just more, again, an observation.
Yeah, no, that's important.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I heard what you just said about the elementary schools, but I have heard from parents that elementary kids feel that their parents feel that they're getting too much homework. So maybe we should look at that too at the same time.
So, the school committee actually has a policy on homework.
Right.
And that might be an interesting discussion to have earlier in the year
Okay.
to take a look at that, because it has some
Alright, that's a good-
guidelines
good idea.
around, the amount of homework at
sure.
different grades. And so I think that would be a great discussion to have. And, as part of that discussion, we can also do some internal work to see, to what degree we think we're in line with what the guidelines
Okay.
are. I think we are, but that would be a good checkpoint. for
It's
us.
also been a sort of a question on that as to, what the amount the teachers think they're giving and what actually is the
Yeah.
results, right? So, a teacher may say, I give an hour and a half a week, but it may be that kids are taking 3 hours to complete. So it's, I don't know how you get the full, perspective. How do you do that?
Mhm. Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it's something actually that's been part of the secondary conversation, that we need to ask kids if their reality is what we think we're doing, and And I think it's gonna be really great to have teachers talking to each other about this issue too, because sometimes it's easy to kind of be in your world and not know what the teacher down the hall is doing as well, yeah.
To that end, one of the things we're doing in terms of the structure of professional development at the elementary level next year is spending more time in grade level teams across the district. It's been a while since we've had the opportunity to do that, with a particular focus on academic needs and looking at the different academic programs, what's happening in one school versus another school. I think we have pretty good collaborations within the schools, but that would give us an opportunity to at least raise this question and have some conversation about it. And it's a good starting place. So the structure would support some good discussion around that if the.
So we could have that conversation maybe in the fall, early fall?
Yeah, that would be good. And this is very specific, and maybe this could be part of the conversation, but 2 points. One, having to do with, homework over vacation. So, when, John Antonucci was superintendent, I think he made a point of saying, and I don't know if it was anywhere, if it was a formal note, but, that there would be no homework over vacations. And I don't know if that's something that, we continue, so there's that. And the other is, one piece of feedback that I've had, and again, this is very specific, and we can talk about at a later date. But when we do those, sort of the homework hiatus, if you will, that, what I'm hearing is that what ends up happening is some teachers are just double up on the homework the next day.
Mhm.
So it really creates more stress.
Defeats the purpose, yeah.
Right, so those kinds of,
The other thing is, we also heard that some teachers weren't following the mandate, you know, that.
Over the
kids-
vacation.
Yeah, they were
Right.
getting homework anyway, so.
right, so it's all part of the conversation.
Yeah, so that's a good thing.
So,
I really found it very interesting, is the coaching, when we have the classes, and the teachers share, because one of the thoughts, and I've seen this happen in many places, where there's a lot of innovation out there, new teachers, a new way of doing something, and often there is an opportunity to share that. So, you know, I'm a third grade teacher in one school, and, you know, I'm not sure what's innovative someplace else. So just this idea of finding innovative things, looking for creative ideas, and sharing them, is a wonderful way to, you know, take advantage of all that that's happening. Often it doesn't happen unless you try to make it happen.
Right.
By finding it, encourage it, and share it. And I just think you're doing that now. I see that as extremely valuable to let everybody pick up the best ideas from other people. But you have to have a formal way of doing it, rather than just running into somebody and casually sharing it. So I think there's an opportunity there to really improve an awful lot.
Great, yeah, the structures are key.
Okay, anything else on homework?
all right, so do you wanna talk about the chief? That's all, it was only a comment.
I talked a lot about the
Yeah.
achievement gap, and so just two specific kind of things. I would say that, because we build things collaboratively, you know, almost every bullet point in the school-specific plans contributes to, closing the achievement gap, right? Because you're educating everyone well. I think if we're talking as measured by specific tests, we can certainly talk about where we would
Okay.
articulate that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's two answers to that question.
Okay, it's fine. All right, my next one, so technology. So Mike in his school improvement plan, I'd like to thank you for putting about Aspen. And it may not be about the technology, it's about the use of Aspen, because I actually do hear a lot from parents about, oh, Aspen stinks. Well, sometimes it's not even that Aspen does, it may not, it stink or not, but it's actually, if you don't put the data in there, it's not helpful, right? So
Right.
that's kind of one piece on that. Another piece on two other technology ones. One is, you know, when we talked about this at one school committee, you know, I know we did the one-to-one, there's now emerging mixed research about what's that done on academic outcomes. I know that's a bigger conversation, but it might be interesting just to understand, what are we finding, what are we starting to find with the experts about outcomes and how technology's done that? And the third one, these are kind of all related, the third one is more about a digital perspective on the whole school system. So, for example, when my daughter went to J-term, I did an electronic permission slip, but there's still a lot of paper going around at other schools, so can we more get rid of paper? So, and these are kind of three unconnected pieces. I know they are, but they were kind of different thoughts, but I don't know what other people's thoughts are.
Yeah, no, I'd be very interested in the one-to-one research, maybe talking to students and also just looking to see if it's helping students or hindering. And I know I've talked about that before in school committee, that it's just, you know, it can be a problem as a parent when you're trying to limit screen time and they're on their, you know, they're doing, the only way to do homework is on the Chromebook, and yet they can very easily start, you know, surfing the net in the middle of the time when you're thinking they're doing homework. So, you know, I think that I'd be interested to learn more about that.
So some of these things are things that we're thinking about. It sounds like it'd be great to have the conversation
Yeah.
and to learn about them. And then some of these things I do want to think about in terms of what does it mean for the work that we're
Okay.
doing.
So when you said that there's more beyond this page,
Well, there isn't in your packet. So
Where is it?
the thinking was that so we're working on specific action steps that go with each of these. And we do have some things drafted.
Okay.
But we wanted to make sure that you were on board with the priorities before we started defining the how of those things. And so this is, you know, a helpful conversation for us to have, so that we can think about what some of those specifics are. And I'm happy to share the draft action steps with you too, if you want to take a look.
Maybe for Jill, yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
Yeah,
a
one
good
more.
We can do that. We just didn't want to get too far out of the gate.
Yeah.
If
No, that's
you
right.
said
Right.
priority two,
Yeah.
or you
Right.
could, you know, and
Right.
so we.
Yep.
So it was a little bit like we did with the budget, I think, we got early input as opposed to, all right, I have to talk about the fourth one.
Okay.
All right, so my fourth one is the subject dear to my heart. And so, as you know, 3 years ago, we had a goal around start times, we had a superintendent transition, we didn't make much progress. We have, I know, the school building work, which will engage a lot of the community, but however, there's been a lot of movement, including one member of our athletic district, Dover Sherburne, who decided to go to 835. There's been a lot of movement in towns like Weston, Lexington voted to find a way, Sudbury, a number of towns. So my suggestion is not that this year, that we start the process, but not about engagement, just start kind of slow, which is this year, we start by learning what other towns, how does Sherburne, what can we learn from Dover Sherburne's process? You know, what can we do for best practices on the process? Kind of go slow for this year, because we need to focus a lot of community engagement on the school building, and that will then set us up in future years to more kind of go broader to the community. So it's more kind of an internal, not a lot of kind of internal, but I'd be interested in what other people.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion, and I think it would be helpful not only to talk to the school districts that have decided to do something, but also to talk to the other school districts in our league and see if they plan to talk about it. Because that's going to affect what we
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about this issue a lot
Yeah.
internally, and I agree with you. I think that, you know, we were talking to Lemma about this actually, because Lemma was in Boston when
Okay.
they went through that. So we had an interesting conversation the other day about lessons learned,
Yeah.
process, what does it take to ramp up to that
Yeah.
process? And we came to the same conclusion, that we need to have some internal conversations and start sort of putting things in
Okay.
place. So when the time is right for the community
Yeah.
engagement,
Good.
we can do
Okay.
that. I happen to think that the school building project and how that all shakes out, and start times and schedules may all end up being
Redistricting,
interrelated
yeah.
in some way when we're thinking about redistricting, exactly, yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So would that be, because I
We'll
agree.
make that an action step.
Right, so will that be, you know, the one, wherever it is, it'll be one of the goals here?
So we can do it anyway. So when we've talked about it, here's how we're thinking about it. So we think that that is an example of healthy and supported school community, right? The start time
Yeah.
issue has to do with,
Yeah.
you know, kids' well-being. And so, you know, we can think of it in one or two ways. If you wanna call it out as a priority, we could put it here. We were thinking that starting that internal discussion planning step might be an action step under 3.1, develop and implement a
Yep.
district-wide plan
Yeah.
for meeting the needs, right? This would be an
Yeah.
example
Like
of
the
something
factors.
that we're doing in the service of that goal.
Can you just add it, can you add physical health as well? Because I think it's not just
Yeah.
social and emotional, it's
Okay,
also
yeah.
physical as part of the.
Yeah,
That's nice, because we're doing this right.
and we're just doing this
Well,
review, so that's all gonna, it's all gonna
Yes.
come together, yeah.
Good, other thoughts? Charlie?
The issue I've been concerned about over a period of time is when MCAS come out, we have a distinction between students with learning disabilities in reading, math, and science. And, you know, we do pretty good with both groups, except I think a few years ago, we found a problem with science. So I'm just very interested in following those and, you looking for where there's more than a 5 or 10% difference, and so that I think is important to keep an eye on as far as, it's a different challenge and experience, but the gap shouldn't be, 5 to 10% and then 40%, so that's always an issue I would have.
Any other thoughts?
One interesting thing on the MCAS front is results are gonna come out earlier this year.
Oh, really?
Or be available for us to see earlier. Actually, the very early release, which only includes multiple choice, is hitting our kind of secure lockbox soon.
Oh,
We
really?
can't release anything publicly
But when's
until.
the public release?
Public release is still in the fall.
Oh.
But in terms of our internal planning, our ability to kind of look at those things over the summer, I think it's getting better this year noticeably than it had been in the past few
It's
years.
something that people in the field have been asking for a long time, because the only way you can plan is if you have that, data available.
Good, okay, good, well, thank you. So why don't we move over to the next topic, which is superintendent's evaluation, which I think Charlie and Carol are gonna lead through.
The policy we've had in the past is as chairman, I've taken the responsibility to work with the committee to work on the evaluation. And just as we just highlighted 2 wonderful elementary schools being cited, I just want to point out this week, US News and World Report, we're not sure who does all of these stuff, but Westwood was ranked the 11th best high school in Massachusetts. And there were 3 charter schools ahead of us, so we're like the 8th best, so that's the staff here and the teachers, but I just like to point that out, that, and we're not sure sometimes just about who's doing the studies, but.
That's all right, we'll take them.
So the process that we use is, I'm responsible for writing up the evaluation, but I've asked, because of Carol is the past chairperson, she and I have sat down and met, we've asked input from the different school committee members. We had a wonderful write-up by Emily on her evaluation, which we've reviewed. And so much of what I'm gonna be going through here is partly to deal with the state's concerns for evaluations, et cetera. So what we're gonna be quickly doing is to, I'm gonna summarize for you 4 areas the state asked us to look at. Professional practice, student learning, school improvement goal, and organizational goal. Those are 4 things that Emily has done, objectives and goals of her own. We're gonna evaluate her on that. And then the state system is instructional, leadership, management, operations, facility, community engagement, professional culture. So that's, the state asked us to look at all of those things as far as it goes. So the first one is the instructional leadership, and just to highlight a few things that we've looked at in that. Emily's been going through a transition process as new superintendent. She's been getting education from a former superintendent who's taken her, visited the classrooms, and everything we've seen so far is that not only was she good to begin with, but she's picking up all kinds of additional skills on how to work with the teachers and giving feedback to the principals, et cetera. A few years ago, this idea of a J-term came up, which was kind of shocked everybody what it meant. And Emily kind of ran with the ball, brought us along with her, and not only successfully implemented the first year, but did an incredible evaluation of what the kids liked, what they didn't like, what the teachers liked, to develop new courses. It just did, I don't think any public high school has ever attempted anything like this. So just the organization of that, taking the idea to get all the teachers to sign in to do it as a part of their contract. It was a challenge in it itself. To get creative school committee people like Carol getting money to help fund it. So it's a wonderful package, and then as you see, if we get home early tonight, we can watch the television. They're monitoring Westwood's program. So you can't ask for much more. Off to a very successful start with additional creative ideas. So that's very unique, just a new idea. What do you do kind of in a quiet time at the end of the year? The issue of diverse learning. There's courageous conversations. I know, not sure everybody's had a chance to get into it, but not only to get the teachers involved in educating the teachers, as well as parents and students in this whole process. 8 workshops were held, 2 new courses, 25 educators are part of a Westwood Schools welcoming group for new students coming in. Elementary libraries getting more into diverse types of books. translation of our school documents into 3 languages, the LGBT students, supporting them, parents and friends. The Medco director is now a part of the administrative council. It's very, very, very interesting. Having gone to the Medco banquet, it was a very, very nice evening of people, with one fellow coming up thanking everybody for his daughter, who graduated as a senior, because he graduated from Westwood High himself. So it's a very, so the ranking, feedback from everybody, exemplary, that first one. Standard management and operations. First of all, there's an awful lot of the J term. It's management, managing people, buses, organizing that. The Mass State Building Authority's eligibility process. To number one, write all the documents to allow us to, is one of 18 accepted communities out of 80 that wanted the money. That was a huge, complex process, and then we organized with tremendous support from the staff. Having attended a couple of meetings in Boston, just the connections to sit down with the people who would be advising Westwood, the respect they had for the administration here to work with us. That was a huge, monstrous management and operations piece that has been handled very well, right up to choosing a very innovative and creative committee, which we're still doing today, with Ken being added, and a wonderful chairperson of mine, who's, we got a tremendous opportunity to do innovative things. The security audit, that not a lot of people know about, because of the nature, it has to be somewhat quiet, to get the town meeting to allow money for doing this, and to bring in top consultants, and to go through all the meetings we had on making our system secure. Losing Heath was a real loss, but to bring in Lemma, it's a wonderful catch to have somebody as talented as Lemma to come in. And just that whole process of interviewing and finding people. The budget process, I felt, was a great process in getting our ideas initially, going around to the schools, getting their ideas, what their priorities, and to somehow shape this massive system of ideas to come in with step by step. I had a chance to meet with Emily about, I think, 24 times before and after meetings, and to be sitting in her office with the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, and to the town manager and the chief of financial planning, and to walk them through everything that we're doing. You know, that's why it went through very, very smoothly, relative to, we had priorities that weren't in the budget, but Emily figured out a way with people retiring, not retiring, to find money to add a new slot that we wanted to have in the middle school. I think so that the budget process itself, not too far away from that was we had to go through a negotiating of a new contract with our teachers, and I think they didn't have their lawyer there. They just had so much confidence in the process. Of course, we had a great person on our side, Josepha, who's been through many of these.
Shout out.
Tony's been added to make sure this thing went through smoothly.
What was I doing? Nothing?
It was all,
There's a lot of love in the room right now.
And then I think, Emily, just by meeting with the town manager and, seeing what they're willing to do, and is there any money available, all of a sudden, they found $300,000 for a new heating vac at the middle school, which we probably would be many years waiting to get that funded, just because of her friendships and they're wanting to help her out. So, ranking exemplary. Family, community, many of these things that we were doing, everything from working with the students, diversity, the parents were involved, the different, the websites you've set up, all of the different information that's being given, newspaper articles, stories about the new process of trying to get a new school. I think you've been getting the community involved in every bit of communications that we can have. As far as the ranking of that particular subject, getting the community involved, the rank is proficient. Professional culture, everything from visiting the classrooms, getting feedback from the teachers, getting the teachers together, getting the principals together, strengthening the administrative council, getting that working better, not that it wasn't great in the first place, develop a shared sense of what we're trying to accomplish among everybody on being on the same page. The ranking for that is exemplary. So back to your own goals that you have set up for yourself. All 4 of those that we rank you exemplary on all of those. So I'd like to ask any school committee members, I tried to put in here what you've said to me.
Yeah.
But anything you'd like to add, and feel free to contact Emily directly with letters.
Contact, okay. We'll call you tomorrow. No, I think you've done an outstanding job. I think, your interactions with parents has been just terrific. You're, kind, you listen, you respond appropriately, you try to help people as much as you can. I mean, you can't always say yes, but you say yes as much as you possibly can. And we really appreciate that, so thank you very much.
And I would compliment you on not just, how you deal with parents, but how you work so well with other officials in the
Yeah.
town.
Mhm.
I mean, there have been years where, there have been some bumps in the road, but I think we have, that your style and professionalism has ensured that we have a very good working relationship with, the other boards in town, so, and that's extremely important, especially with the project, so.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I would just say that I am very grateful for your guidance in the school building committee, and just all the hard work you've done to get us where we are. And it's really very easy to work with you, and I'm excited going forward with the committee. I think it will be great, and the project, so very happy.
So can I also say that, it's time to start talking and thinking about, Emily's contract renewal. So, to that end, I'm going to suggest that we establish a subcommittee, to try to negotiate with Emily and to come back to the committee with the recommendation. And I think since Charlie and Carol have worked with Emily, they should form a subcommittee and do that for us. Does that sound okay?
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine.
Right, so, are you ready? We continue to work together?
Continue to work together.
Okay then,
Yeah.
that'd be great. Everybody
Let's
good?
go. Fine.
Okay, I just want to say thank you, and this is a wonderful committee to work with as well. I really appreciate all the support. I feel tremendously lucky to be in Westwood, in case that isn't clear, and the team that I work with here, we talk about things that I'm accomplishing, but I think most of the time I'm taking credit for things that all of these folks are working on as well. So thank you very much for your support and their support, and I look forward.
All right, good.
All right.
All right, next agenda item. So the school committee, the Arizons, a couple things. We can talk about this more at the July meeting.
Yeah, the retreat.
Yeah, the retreat, yeah. If you have
Retreat in those mountains?
in the mountains, yes. If there's anything in particular you have a passion for, just let me know, email me or call me. The only other thing I do want to talk about in July, we kind of have this, my sense that we've had this for a long time. There might be some of these things, there might be a couple that might be merged, there might be a couple that can go away.
Is there anything that we want to add?
Well, that's the other piece. If there's things you want to add in particular, so give some thought to that, because there's a few of these I'm kind of like, I look at, and I'm
Is
not
there any in particular right now you're?
Well, I guess J-term, do we still need a school committee rep on that? Or was that kind of because we were getting up and running? That was one.
I volunteered for, they asked me my opinion from time to time.
Yeah.
Take care of how I'm right along.
Yeah, I think we probably, we have a steering committee and Charlie was attending all the meetings. We're not really doing that process anymore,
Okay.
but certainly still reaching out, I
Yeah.
think, for input would be great.
What about MASC delegate and legislation? Does anybody go to that?
Well, that was my thing. I think I've been assigned to those, or to other people, and I don't know if any we've, I mean,
In
if we.
25 years, I don't think
Yeah.
anybody's
Do we need
gone.
to do it?
Well, that's what I mean. Either we
Was it
get-
worthwhile?
I've never done it. That's what I mean. Either we get rid of it or we do
Nobody's ever
something.
done this.
The other one, tech is one we talked about. We can talk about that offline. So I think there's a few, but I guess the other thing is give some thought. If there's things that we think, are missing, there might
Yeah.
be 3 or 4 we can get rid of. But if there's things missing, let's do that as well.
Okay.
All right?
Also, Tony, there are gonna be some that you ought to be there, but they're gonna be strung out with a lot of other
Yeah,
So you
yeah.
might want to deputize people because.
Yeah, well, yeah, just if you
you're
have
gonna
one
a lot more to do.
passionate.
Right.
Okay, all right. Next thing is action items on the agenda. First action item is approval of the minutes for May 16th, 2019.
Want a motion?
Sure.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of May 16th,
Is there
2019.
a second?
A second.
Any discussion? Hearing none? All those in favor? Unanimous. The next action item is the approval of the 2019-2020 school improvement plans. Is there any, other besides they're in here, anything else?
No, you know, principals, I'm sure would be happy to answer any questions if you have them. I think you understand the structure this year is that we've tried to make them work in concert with the district.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have a motion to approve the 2019-2020 school improvement
So
plan?
moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all those any discussion? All those in favor? All right, unanimous, the vote is unanimous. The next third point is the vote to ratify the WTA collective bargaining agreement, which
Yeah, you work so hard.
which is in the agreement, which is in the document. Anything on that?
No, so we discussed it in the executive session. You've got the red line version, so you can see what changes were made.
Right.
Good, do I have a motion to approve, vote to ratify the WTA?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? All right, unanimous. Then the fourth point, and I think there's a backup, is the approval of the non-bargaining increases. I do have one question, which is around, substitutes were flat, and my understanding was substitutes were hard to get, but.
Yes, so we, I'll let Lemma talk about that, what our plan is.
Sorry.
Give it time. So anyway, we did make we don't have a fully fleshed out plan, but we do have an intention to, have a strategic way that we, incentivize substitutes to return to the district. So we're looking at ways to do that, which may not be just a flat line increase to the rate across the board, but to leverage the money in a way that will have a little bit of a better return for us and having people returning on a regular basis. So that was the thing.
You are correct, though, that we put an additional $20,000 into the budget to try to address this. I think you may be thinking that $20,000 wouldn't actually allow us to really increase this rate, but we think this is a better plan. In other words, we're trying to get people to come to Western and stay, and so we're trying to retain them.
Fair enough. All right, could I have a motion to approve the 2020 non-bargaining increases?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Any discussion? All those in favor? All right, the next one is the, acceptance of a $5,000 donation for the J-Term Shed project.
Yeah, so we're very appreciative to the Martha Jones PTO, our basic carpentry and wiring class that Mr. Alent is one of the instructors for, is building a shed this year on the Martha Jones property. That's the outcome of the class, and the PTO has donated $5,000 to pay for the materials, effectively is financing that class.
Motion to approve.
All right, any second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. The next one is the acceptance of a $7,000 grant for EI training for middle and high school teachers.
Talked about that, so as part of kind of the emphasis on SEL, one thing we did was apply for a grant through the Foundation for Westwood Education to send a leadership team to Yale and the Center for Emotional Intelligence for their ruler training program. And it's a program that's very, it's kind of part of the origin story of SEL in the United States, very reputable, and they fortunately have kind of a train the trainer approach. So if we send a kind of cohort of leaders, they'll be able to come back out and implement the work. And we really focused on the secondary level for this because we have some other things that are doing at the primary level. So the hope is that we'll be able to send the new SEL coordinator, who I'm almost about to sign a contract with, so we're excited about that, as well as an administrator or teacher leader from the high school and the middle school.
When did they go?
July.
Great.
I'll move to accept the $7,000 grant.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. So the next agenda item is approval of a Spain trip, April 2020. So I'd ask, actually, I'd like to hear a little bit more. I'd also ask you, like, you can update the committee about kind of the review process of
Policy.
yeah.
Yeah, so we had talked about taking a look at our, foreign travel policy, and I have asked our attorney to look at that policy for us. We had intended to do this a little earlier in the spring, but we ended up, moving up the vaping policy. We gotta work on that first. But I imagine in the fall, we'll be able to bring something forward. She's looking into what some other communities do around this as well, so we can have a discussion about that.
And when is this trip?
So this trip is for next April, and it's part of that ongoing relationship we have with the exchange program between, a school in Spain and here.
Do we have any idea of the number of kids who would go?
I'm gonna have to look to Mr. Bennett, I'm not sure.
It's usually in the neighborhood of like 18 to 22. It's like a classroom size that we will host and send for years, kind of gone back and forth with about that amount.
How many years have you been trying to get on these trips, just?
For me, 27.
Okay. Just did a question, Sean, kids who can't afford it or it's questionable, the $2,500, do we have any way to help them with scholarships, or is it?
Yes, we do. We've had a small scholarship amount that we will, we let kids know is available, and then they apply for it, and I meet with them to indicate the level of need, that scholarship amount to meet the need if we can.
Okay, anything else? All right, so do I have a motion to accept approval of Spain trip April 2001?
So moved.
Second. I
Any
thought you were
discussion,
gonna
further
say it.
discussion? All those in favor? Aye. All right. Finally, the final piece is the vote to update the school building membership to include Ken Aries.
And he's sitting there on the edge of a seat.
He might want this vote to go the other way.
Thinking the same thing.
All right, do I have a motion?
Oh, and I'm second,
Any discussion?
I'd just like for the record to say that I was the one who delivered the message to Ken, and he was super excited.
Oh, yeah.
He's like, I can't believe you didn't ask me earlier.
Another meeting, right?
And I still can't get my car detailed.
Yeah.
All those in favor? Aye.
Allison
All right.
wants to make one correction
I have to
about
make
the
a
forward.
correction on the
grant.
grant. I apologize. I said the Foundation for Westwood Education on the ruler training. It's not them, although they are a very generous organization that support us in many ways. It was I Am Strong that
Yeah,
funded
I
this
saw
grant.
that.
which is
Do we need
fun.
to do a new, motion then? Does it matter?
Just- Yeah, why
just
don't
to
we
be
just-
safe, why
All
not?
right.
Okay.
That'd be nice.
This was the seventh, do I have a motion to accept the $7,000 grant from I Am Strong for EI training?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Thank you.
All right, any new business, anything else?
I
Yes.
have one question. So at last month, you, we were very happy to hear about the reorganization and guidance for both the middle school and the high school. And I think Lynn was posted them today. I wanted to get an update on that because, particularly at the middle school, we're in the middle of 5th grade, transition, moving up ceremonies. And a lot of parents have been looking at the website, and the website is listing 2 guidance counselors and showing them broken up by alphabetically. But yet the news has been traveling that there's now 3 guidance counselors. So there's a lot of confusion going on among the 5th grade parents about who the counselors are going to be next year. I think it's causing some unnecessary angst. So when are we going to announce the new, the counselors assigned to the grade? When will that announcement be made?
I don't know, and I don't know.
Hiding in the
It-
He's in
I
the
was like,
corner.
where
He's
is
behind
Mr.
there.
Redmond? There he is, yeah.
So we have a guidance counselor who's part of this, who's on leave currently, and we're in the process of trying to set up a meeting with all of our guidance counselors who are part of this process to talk about the logistics. So we hope that that's gonna happen on Monday, and then we'll have that information.
And so, do you anticipate, because I'm hearing the same thing, do you anticipate that maybe by the end of June, you would have information to the parents about, yes?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else on new business? Okay, so now the school committee will be going to executive session to to discuss issues with special requirements of the law as regards to minutes. And we will not be returning back to public session. So do I have a motion to move to executive session?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.